The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Fenland for the last episode this week. Now beginning this episode outside a non-league football club. These guys play in the 10th tier of English football. That is Parson Drove FC, and you'll find them in the parish of Parson Drove. Parson Drove, Cleric's Cattle Lane. Ending this initial run of parishes in the Fenland district of Cambridgeshire, today we come to Parson Drove. Located in the Isle of Ely, Parson Drove is a linear settlement that lies 6 miles west of Wisbech. It's named after the central thoroughfare along which the village developed. Known as a green drove, it was much wider than the current one, which carries the road number B1166. The Parson part of its name is likely to be religious. The drove was probably used by clergymen making their way to Wisbech. This area was almost certainly once farmed by the Romans, and they've left lots of evidence of their presence in several places throughout Parson Drove and the surrounding parish. Farming is still very much king out here. So too at one time was the milling of Woad, which we met back in Newton in the Isle. It was here in Parson Drove where the last working temporary Woad Mill in the country was located before it was demolished in 1914. In this video, I'll show you where it was. It was sited directly opposite the now redundant Church of St John the Baptist, a long way from the centre of Parson Drove village. In the centre, there's a pub called the Swan Inn, which has a literary link to the famous diarist Samuel Pepys. Not far from it is the Cage, built in 1829 as a village lockup for local criminals and stray livestock, but it also housed a fire pump for nearly 100 years. Also in this one we'll see Parson Drove FC, who are members of the English Football League system. We'll end by driving to a place called Murrow, which is partially within the parish boundaries. There's loads to cover in this one, so let's go. Parson Drove is a very linear village. It lies upon a long, wide lane known to the locals as a green drove. Historically, the drove would have been a lot wider than it currently is. Droves are usually given names that relate to their owners or the herders which use them to move cattle up and down them. Here in Parson Drove, that's probably not the case. In this instance, the drove was likely once a way between Leverington and a chapel in the village, over which a parson might have travelled. This makes sense when you consider Parson Drove was once part of Leverington Parish, and therefore the parsons would need to travel. So, during the course of this episode, we're going to follow in the footsteps of the clergymen who may have travelled up and down this lane. Let's get started with a pub called the Five Bells. Of the handful of pubs around here, the Five Bells was the one I found the least about. Seemingly closed now, it dates back to the 16th century. It was a free house with a bar, a lounge and a conservatory restaurant. The Five Bells name is likely to be a reference to the next thing along the drove, the church. It is, after all, within earshot. Okay, not far from the Five Bells, you've got two landmarks which are virtually opposite each other. One of them is a church, which is here. We'll talk about that in a second. And the other one, of course, is what remains of Parson Drove's Woad Mill. Parson Drove has several churches. They include the Emanuel Church, which a lot of folk alternatively know as the New Church. The reason why is all down to this one. Now redundant, this is the old church dedicated to St John the Baptist. It dates from the 12th century and includes additions and renovations from the 14th, 15th and 17th centuries. In 1613, the chancel was destroyed by floods. The south aisle was largely rebuilt in around 1800, and the south wall of the south aisle was rebuilt in the early part of the 19th century. The church stands at the eastern end of the village, a long way from the centre of Parson Drove. It's on the northern side of the B1166. Despite being redundant, it still carries a Grade 2 listing. Today it's managed by the church's Conservation Trust and has been since 1974. That said, it's fast becoming a new community hub. In recent times, the locals have formed the Friends of St John's group and actively raise funds for the maintenance and upkeep of the church. They've helped to transform it from an empty and almost forgotten space to a building that sees a wide variety of events and gatherings throughout the year. These include various fairs and markets, live music events, craft workshops, fashion shows, quiz nights, outdoor theatres, and so much more. Somewhere in the vicinity of these houses opposite the church is where the last temporary Woad Mill in Britain was located. It closed in 1910 and was demolished in 1914. Only two other mills, Alderman and Skirbeck, survived longer. They were permanent woad mills and were demolished in 1927 and 1932 respectively. An article about the Woad Mill appeared in the Daily Mail in 1900 and described the collection of buildings here as primitive and weather-beaten. Here, woad was pulped and prepared for dyers, who needed it for the fashions of centuries ago. 10 acres of woad plantation was sufficient to keep the Parson Drove mill working at a profit. Typically, woad was harvested in June and the leaves were then crushed in the mill. The resulting pulp was then made into balls. These were left to dry and then mixed with water and left to ferment in darkness for 20 to 30 days. A simple process, really. The mill was a conically thatched building with a second lower building attached to it called the couching house. That's where the fermentation process was carried out. The drying range had low walls built of turf. That and the thick thatch above helped to keep the temperature more or less constant. Parson Drove is large enough to sustain a surgery, and that's next on our list here. Last year, this was rated inadequate by the CQC. A recent inspection revealed significant declines in areas previously considered good, and it identified both clinical and other concerns. Hopefully now, though, things are looking up. It's never good to dwell on anything negative, so we've no reason to here. It's really good that the place actually has a surgery, given that so many villages don't. Now it's time to explore the rest of the village on foot, so let's keep heading westwards and park this car outside the village hall. We'll get the ball rolling with Parson Drove FC. Okay, so now we're on foot, and Parson Drove FC are our first landmark here. Like I said in the intro, these guys play in the 10th tier of English football. It's been a while since we saw a non-league team, isn't it? And I always like to find them. I always like to say it's an unwritten rule on this channel. If there's a non-league team in the village, we have to go and see them. So let's see them. Parson Drove FC, or if you will, FC Parson Drove, are a non-league football club and members of England's National League system. They currently ply their trade in the 10th tier, the Eastern Counties League Division 1 North. The club was established in 1921 by the headmaster of the local council school. After World War II, the club played in the Peterborough and District League and also started entering the FA Cup. Due to a lack of a suitable venue, after the war the club moved to Murrow for 2 seasons before moving on to a field on Fen Road, known as Down the Fen. Since 1975 they've played here on the playing field on Main Road behind the village hall. In the 1979-1980 season they went on a ridiculous FA Cup run. It saw them notch huge upset wins over the likes of Chelmsford City and Kings Lynn, teams which are regulars now in the National League North and South. Just 8 years later, they found themselves in a sorry state, with their ground in a dilapidated condition and a lack of interest from the public and players. The club was therefore disbanded. 4 years later, in 1992, they were resurrected and re-entered the Peterborough and District League in Division 6. Since then, they've worked their way back up the leagues. Now, my Latin is not fantastic, but I can have a stab, I think, at what the Latin is on Parson Drove's logo. Nemo cogniter potest conseque. I think cogniter is something to do with the mind. Conseque is probably consequences. So something mind, something consequences. If anybody else out there is better at Latin than me, then let me know in the comments. Nemo, is that a fish? In front of the playing field is the village hall, and this is the hub for all things community in Parson Drove. It holds weekly groups such as coffee mornings, table tennis, ballet and indoor bowls. These are the backbone of the hall, and without them Parson Drove probably wouldn't have one. It also holds regular bingo and quiz nights where some great little prizes can be won. Amenities 95, which is the committee that run the village hall, also put on bigger events throughout the year. 2025 will see them host a car show, a sausage supper, a race night, a cabaret night, a Halloween disco and a New Year's Eve party. Over the road we go now to a street called John Ben's Way. This is named after a man whose charity Parson Drove benefits from every year. The village has several charities actually. Together they're known as the Parson Drove United Charities, and among them is the John Ben's Educational Foundation. Today, 1/3 of its annual income is allocated to the foundation's governors, but it still does what it was set up to do: provide for the general well-being of the poor of Parson Drove. Now, even though short mat indoor bowls is played in the village hall, Parson Drove has an outdoor club too. John Ben's Way is right next to it, and it's on your screens right now. Now, there are 3 pubs in this village. We've already seen the Five Bells, and next up we have the Butcher's Arms. Now, Google still lists this pub as open, but clearly it's not. It was probably a Regency coaching inn originally. It has a series of oak beams and posts in the old bar. The extension was built in 1870 and it used to house a billiards table. There was a restaurant here too, situated in an adjoining barn. That was originally the stable block in its coaching days. The main bar was dominated by a large ingle nook, which was furnished with a cast iron wood burner. So I can't imagine the Butcher's Arms has been gone long actually, because it's still listed as open on Google Maps. So maybe this year or potentially last year, who knows. It's definitely not in business anymore. Time to move on again. Churches are next on our list. Sited within a few yards of each other, next we have 2 churches to have a look at. First of all, it's St Mark's Methodist Church. This is pretty much the only thing on the route today that I found nothing about, but Parson Drove's connection to Methodism goes back to at least 1833. That's when a Wesleyan society was founded in the village, but where they met is seemingly unknown. Could this chapel stand in place of an old Wesleyan building? I guess it's possible. Now we come to the Emanuel Church, built to replace the now redundant Church of St John the Baptist. It dates from 1872 and contains some rather fancy chandeliers. They came originally from none other than St Paul's Cathedral in the City of London. How about that for a piece of notability? The Emanuel Church was built purely because of Parson Drove's continual growth throughout the 19th century. St John's was simply too small. In 1895 the nave roof was reconstructed, and by the later part of the 20th century there was no need anymore for 2 churches in the village. This church provides a lovely, warm and welcoming place for all to enjoy with regular services and events throughout the year. It's well known for a flower festival and some busy fairs. Now we're at the school. This is Alderman Payne Primary, which was formerly known as the Payne County Primary School, the Payne Council School and the Parson Drove Council School. It's a designated community school operating under the control of Cambridgeshire County Council. It's named after the Alderman John William Payne. Built in 1933, this school has served the village and the surrounding fens for almost a century. It celebrated its 90th birthday in 2023 with a small tea party and a dance performance. In 1990, the original school building was extended with a portion set aside as a day centre for the elderly. That was later relocated in April 2010. John Payne, who was one of 3 brothers, was made an alderman of the Isle of Ely in 1932. In 1935, his youngest son Harry also received the same honour. His father, Richard, was also an alderman at the time, which means for a short period there were 3 of them, all from the same family. Richard Payne died in 1936. In the 1930s, both John and Harry ran for Parliament with the Liberal Party, but were unsuccessful. Richard Payne Jr., John's brother, was at one time chairman of Wisbech Rural District Council. Okay, almost next door to the school is the shop, and this brings us to a name that's been associated with Parson Drove for ages: Viles. The centre of the village can be defined as the area that flanks the eastern side of a crossroads along the route of the North Level main drain. This next thing to see is a shop where the name G.W. Viles and Son can still be seen over the front window. Viles has been a name associated with Parson Drove for decades. This shop was run by them for years, and at one time there were petrol pumps outside it. The shop is perhaps best remembered by cyclists. Viles sold cycle parts and even fixed them if you had any trouble. The shop might still be here, but it was a different time back then. Parson Drove has several buildings that date from the 16th century, 10 of which are Grade 2 listed. In total, the village has 20 listed buildings. One, curiously, that's not among them is next. This here is the Swan Inn, which has been here since at least 1541. This pub is rather notable because a famous diarist once stayed within its walls, Samuel Pepys. It's fair to say that Pepys didn't really like Parson Drove all that much. In his diary, the entry for the 17th of September 1663 described the village as a heathen place. He was here because he was visiting his aunt and uncle, who lived in what he called a sad, poor, thatched cottage. He didn't have anything good to say about the Swan either. He termed this a miserable inn, and his room was a cold, stony chamber. He also recorded that this was the building from which his uncle's horse was stolen by a lawyer's clerk from London. These days, one would hope the Swan Inn isn't miserable and its rooms are a bit warmer. In 1834, it belonged to Charles Boucher, a brewer, who almost rebuilt it entirely. Okay, in front of the Swan, you'll find this thing. Now, I'm not 100% sure what this is, although there is a little plaque that's in the middle of it. At the top, it says 60 years. You can see years there. If you go around the other side, it does say 60, although the eye's missing, as you can see. It just goes SXTY. But it is meant to be 60 years. And here's the plaque, and it says, "In memory of Robert Scrimshaw, founder member and previous chair of Parson Drove Street Pride Group." Pepys wasn't the only man of note to stay at the Swan Inn. Another was John Peck, a local benefactor, and it was he who built this next landmark in 1829. This is the Cage, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It began its life as a makeshift prison, but it wasn't just a lockup for people, it was also used for animals. The roof is surmounted by a clock turret to commemorate the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria. In 1983, the Cage was given a Grade 2 listing. It is, without a doubt, Parson Drove's centrepiece. Its role as a lockup didn't last long. The size of the building was almost too perfect for what it was eventually to become. In 1831, it was turned into a fire engine house. This was due to the unrest in the agricultural community due to the impact of early farm machinery. The angry workforce often started deliberate fires in protest, lighting cornfields and haystacks. Peck, fearing the effects on the village, decided a fire pump was required. He obtained a public subscription and went to London and bought one for £118. For 95 years, it housed the pump before becoming a police post during wartime. In more recent years, it's been used to store parish documents and equipment. In all, Peck became a well-known member of the local community. He set up a farm in Parson Drove and later lived here while serving on local drainage boards. He held the office of parish constable for 35 years and, like Pepys, kept diaries throughout his life. These were transcribed in the 1990s and have since become a useful source of local history. So this is the bridge that connects the eastern side of Parson Drove to the west across the North Level main drain. Given the proximity of the pub, I don't really need to explain how this bridge gets its name. It's called Swanbridge. Let's talk a bit about the drain instead. Having first met this back at Foul Anchor where it meets the Nene, it's kind of crazy just how far south and west we've come since then, but I promise this is the same waterway. The north level main drain was, and still is, a crucial piece of infrastructure for draining the fens. Here in Parson Drove, just like elsewhere, it protects the village from flooding. Although most of the fens were drained several centuries ago, resulting in a flat, damp, low-lying agricultural region, this drain hasn't always been the same. Its current route was constructed in the 1830s to the designs of John Rennie. It drains the area of the North Level District Internal Drainage Board. And as we learned on Monday, this eventually ends up in the River Nene and the sluice we saw at Foul Anchor. Right, we are going back over this little footbridge now, which is adjacent to the main Swanbridge, and we're heading for the other side of the green over there. Now, there's a few bits and bobs on there of note, including another shop. Alongside the drain runs the B1187, or if you will, Morrow Bank. It's actually a mini bypass, believe it or not. Its old route today follows a second street called the Bank. Although there's literally just yards between them, it's enough to allow Parson Drove to have one of the largest village greens in Cambridgeshire. Very few villages in Cambridgeshire have a village green at all, so Parson Drove should consider itself doubly lucky. Together with the open countryside, this is perfect for a quiet stroll. As well as Vile's old shop, the village has many other facilities available to it. On the Bank is one of these. It's a second shop which also includes a post office branch. This is owned by a man named Phil Redman, and loads of people love his shop. Some of the locals have even described stepping foot into this place as walking into your own living room. The reason is pretty simple. Out here, people look out for each other, and Parson Drove has had that kind of close-knit community for centuries. Our final landmark is on the green itself. It's the War Memorial, which takes the form of a plain grey granite obelisk in a railed enclosure. Initially for World War I only, later inscriptions for those lost in World War II can be found on two freestanding book-style white marble tablets in front of the main cross. In total, 28 men from Parson Drove fought across the two World Wars. 15 were lost in World War I and 13 in World War II. And that's about it on foot, but we still have something else to cover. To the south of Parson Drove, the parish boundary runs level with a road called Sea Dyke Bank, which becomes back road in a place called Murrow. That's the lane we're on here, and it's virtually parallel to the drove on which Parson Drove is sited. Because it follows this road right down the middle, it means that part of this village is actually within Parson Drove's boundaries. In 1376, Murrow was written as Morrow and derives from the Old English words moor, meaning marsh, and raw, meaning row. In this context, it meant a row of houses. Murrow would have stood on what was effectively a huge marsh. If you look at old maps of the Isle of Ely, this makes sense. Both Murrow and Parson Drove were within the lowest lying areas of the fens, and the only inhabitable places would have been the banks and ridges that form their main streets today. Most of Murrow sits within Wisbech St Mary, generally speaking everything to the south of this road. That includes landmarks such as its pub, which is called the Bell. Wisbech St Mary also covers the site of Murrow's two railway stations. Named Murrow East and Murrow West, they were on two different lines, both of which have now gone. Other notable features of Murrow include a village hall, a Methodist chapel, a park and a primary school, but it's all within Wisbech St Mary. All of that means we'll be back here again very soon. This wasn't out of my way though, because driving through Murrow is one of the ways to reach the A47 from Parson Drove. So we're done with this first run through Fenland. What a journey so far, with so many little stories and secrets to get stuck into. There's a lot more of this to come. We still have 11 more Fenland parishes to visit, including the likes of Wisbech, Chatteris and March. We're staying in Cambridgeshire this weekend though, with a couple in Huntingdonshire. See you there. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.